Welcome to the Sacred Window podcast. Here, we look closely at the intersections of the postpartum window, the Ayurvedic perspective on health and healing, and the universal mother principles that are the keys to giving and receiving effective care. Hello, I'm Christine Devlin Eck. I'll be taking you through interviews with professionals who are making a profound difference in the lives of their clients, conversations with individuals brave enough to share their stories of vulnerability as a way to lift up others, and my own journey through birth, parenting, caregiving, and building a conscious business. We are here to honor the sacred windows, the profound transitions in life that give it all meaning. Welcome to the conversation.
And I will never be the same again.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy to be here today on an episode of the Sacred Window podcast with my guest, Maria Clemente Morresi. Maria is a mental health professional. She lives in New Jersey, but she sees clients virtually via telehealth in New Jersey, Florida, and Vermont. Her company is called Reimagined Mind Counseling and Consultation. Maria is the founder and the CEO. I connected with Maria through the Perinatal Resource Collaborative, of which she is the vice president. Maria is a mama to one. She's almost a mama to two on the way. And today we kind of talked a little bit about how we could really get to another aspect of looking at perinatal mood and anxiety disorders through the lens of how the doula can be of best support. And I was really drawn to Maria's idea of kind of looking at some of the most common diagnoses that people experience in mental health postpartum and looking at an overview of them, what their typical symptoms are, as a way for people who are in the care providing role, how we can best look out for what our clients might need, and just be more aware. When we're aware, we have more autonomy, we have more ability to help. And so, Maria, I just want to say thank you so much for being willing to talk about this with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's jump in. Tell me a little bit about your work and how you have gone down the path towards mental health specifically for new moms. Yeah, I want to hear a little bit about your story.
Sure. Yeah, I started out really with working with teenagers, which was a really wonderful population to work with. I still really enjoy that population. It's also a period of life that is so changing and also acute. So similar to the perinatal period, it's very life altering and also acute. So I do find similarities in that too. And a lot of our discomforts or traumas or whatnot from childhood and adolescence do come up in our perinatal period. So I do find a nice alignment with the two populations. And so I started, like I said, with teens, and it really happened pretty organically. It was before I was a mom. One of my good friends is an OBGYN. And she called me and said, Maria, I sometimes feel like I'm getting inundated with conversations that my patients are having with me, leading into more of the emotional discussions, which she is one of the most empathetic people. I really value her as a friend, but also as a professional. But as an OBGYN, your role is a lot more, you have a lot less time, a lot less face time with your patient. So she had this one particular patient who was young and going through a lot of very difficult stuff with her relationship at the time of her pregnancy. And she was presenting with what my friend thought was kind of like antenatal depression, like so during the pregnancy. And she said, do you treat that? And I said, honestly, I've never treated depression within the perinatal stage, but if she's open to meeting me and seeing if we connect energetically and seeing where it goes, I'm open to it. So long story short, we connected. I still sometimes see this client every now and then. It's been many years. And through that experience with that client, I really developed a love and a passion for that period of time, knowing too that I wasn't probably too far off myself from my personal journey in the perinatal in the perinatal period. So I wound up going to take more education, getting my PMHC through PSI International, to make sure that that education background is there, so I felt more confident working with that population, because there are some nuances that happen, that are not general to mental health. It's more specific to this population, as any population has its nuances and specificities. So that's really how it happened. And then a lot of the women that work with me, beautiful, incredibly talented women, very passionate about supporting other women. We don't only see women in the practice, but it is a large that's the majority of who we see, and it kind of turns into supporting a woman, whether they're that early stage of development, where they're in that adolescent, the perinatal period, which was what we're talking about today, or the motherhood period, postpartum, like postpartum, many years later, when maybe that mother has their own teenager and they're dealing with a lot of the challenges that come with that. So we see a range of clients, but I'd say it is one of the passions of many of the clinicians that work with me, including the nutritionist who works with me, is really supporting women during that time, such a sensitive time. So to have support is paramount.
Oh my gosh, yes, and I'm in love with how you started it right off the bat of how it's so connected to that transitionary period in our teens. It comes first full circle, and then like I just heard you say, when we're raising our own kids as they get older and then they become teens and then all of a sudden we're going through a whole other transition. They're so related and linked, and you know, we'll move forward in this conversation, but I have to just put out there that it's, how we experience one is going to directly impact how we go through the next one. And so to be there for our teens, that has an impact in how they become parents and how they potentially are going to go through their own sacred window. So thank you for just bringing that connection in right off the bat. And I also, want to just remind listeners that, if you don't already know, when folks go through training to become mental health professionals, they don't automatically get that understanding of the postpartum window. It's not built into the way that mental health practitioners practice. That's an extra layer of education that they must go through. And that's why it's so important when we're working with postpartum families to know who the mental health professionals are that do have that specialty, that do have that layer of understanding. And I thought it would be really helpful, Maria, if you could, I know we're going to go into some of these specific expressions of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. However, like what briefly is that extra layer for postpartum people that we need to understand if we are mental health providers? How does it change the way we work with people?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's really well said. With any specialty, right? With any specialty, it's important that the person that you're working with has some knowledge extra on top of the original curriculum they went through. But when it comes to the perinatal period, I would say that the things that make it unique to having more understanding about this particular period are twofold in my eyes, maybe more than twofold, but I'll speak about two of the components. The first is the actual physical changes, both like hormonal changes, the brain changes, the neurochemistry, all of that happens during pregnancy and postpartum, and then sometimes even further, depending upon if that mother is continuing to breastfeed, because breastfeeding also adds a whole other layer of hormonal changes that go on in the body as you're breastfeeding. So I'd say that understanding for lack of a better scientific term, the anatomy of pregnancy, and whether it's the biochemistry or the physical changes, there are some very specific like physical changes that even happen in the brain that now we have the capacity to understand. And without getting into too much detail, there's one in particular center of the brain or part of the brain that is generally affected with most moms, if not all moms, but some who experience mental health challenges. have more of this region affected. And it's called the amygdala, and it is the alarm center of our brain. And what we see often in when they do studies on the imaging of the brain, we often see increased gray matter around that region. And all that really means in terms of what how we talk about it is that there's more activity there. And so when there's more activity in an alarm, it's going to go off more easily than it might have in the past. So that plays a huge role when it comes to anxiety. And so it is a natural thing for the mother's brain to change as they become a mother, because we are evolutionarily designed to protect our offspring. So it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective that our brain would create this change automatically so that we could be more vigilant for our children. However, it sometimes goes a little bit haywire because we don't have to worry about, conditions outside. We're blessed in a lot of ways that we weren't maybe in many years past, where we don't have to worry about animals harming our child or different sicknesses coming in and taking our child. That still exists, but it's not as much of a threat anymore. So that alarm system doesn't know what to do with itself when it has this extra activity. And when we're stuck and we're isolated because our culture is very different now, it starts to go a little haywire. And so understanding these things, to just bring it back to your question, really helps a practitioner be able to bring it down, bring the mom down to a very listen, your brain is doing its thing that it's naturally supposed to do. We just need to remember we have to figure out how to hack it again. Because maybe you figured it out before you were a mom, but now we have to relearn a little bit. And then the second thing I'd say, and this is how I describe it a lot to women who come into my practice who are in this period. This is more of like a spiritual kind of way I look at this particular period of life. I believe, and the work that I do has shown it this way for me in my experience, is that becoming pregnant and becoming a mother opens something inside of us, somewhat of a portal. And I think it actually really works nicely with your name, Sacred Window. It opens up this window inside of us that perhaps we had closed in the past. Maybe we didn't address it or even look through it in the past. And maybe the things that were through that window were really unkind or uncomfortable. And it becomes it becomes something we cannot not look into. It becomes a window or a portal that we cannot ignore when we're pregnant or postpartum, because it is so present physically. It becomes so visceral in all of the responses we have. And so understanding that from a more spiritual or somatic perspective, and we do a lot of the trauma informed somatic work in my practice, I think being able to explain that to a mother in a way that she can understand, can then say, okay, well, if we're forced to look at some of the stuff, some of the shadows, some of the ugly things that maybe you didn't want to look at in the past, let's do that now together in a safe way when the window is open, because you have a short period. You can bury it again, you can shut it, but it's going to come up at another point. So let's do it while it's fresh and open, even though it feels really vulnerable, so that we can close the window at your pace and feel like when we're looking out it's a beautiful place. And so I'd say that while that's not necessarily clinical in the traditional sense, it is unique to the perinatal period.
I love that so much. There's such opportunity. It's like, when you were talking about giving people the opportunity to realize that so many things have changed and they're not really operating under the same rules anymore. I can't remember how exactly you said it, but I think that there's such opportunity. It's like nature gives us this shift on purpose. It's on purpose. We get like this whole new set of perceptions and skills, and it's almost like appreciating it in a way helps to create some peace and gentleness for ourselves around that. And I am 100% with you on that spiritual approach to navigating it, because there's such opportunity there for really deep peace and profound growth. And that's, one thing about the Ayurvedic perspective when we look at the concept of kaya kalpa, where it's like if we are given the space to heal and transition intentionally during this window, we're impacted for decades to come. It like opens up a exponential opportunity for so much on physical levels, emotional, spiritual, identity. It's really cool. So
Yeah,
uh,
it
thank you so
is.
much for sharing that, because it's
Sure.
really cool to just sort of approach the topic, which is heavy, about how
It is.
many people experience um, mental health struggles during the postpartum window, and we have to do something about it. And the imperative aspect of that is being able to know more about it, and also understand all the layers of what giving care is. So we talk about that on a million episodes of like how to give good care,
Yeah.
but let's really spend time looking at what the experiences that people have most commonly when they're going through perinatal mood and anxiety expressions, and we'll have like a better idea of what we're looking at, and then we'll kind of follow up. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about like what is the next step for doulas when they start to see this. Uh,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I feel like, some level of anxiety is kind of bound to be present for everybody. We're
It's
navigating
normal.
intense, hormonal changes. So much is new. So yeah, it is normal, and it can quickly become not sustainable. So talk a little bit about perinatal anxiety and how that looks and how people experience it.
Absolutely. So one of the things you mentioned, though, first, I just want to kind of hit the nail on the head for, just to bring it home, is that the how common PMADs are for women. Um, but even more than PMADs, which stands for Perinatal Mood and Anxiety Disorder, which I think you said earlier, is more common than that is what we call the baby blues period. And that can feel extremely scary, extremely heavy for moms. That happens usually 2 to 3 days after birth and can sustain itself for about 2 weeks after a woman gives birth. Um, Now, that happens for upwards of 80% of women, and it naturally resolves itself. But had you not been prepared or even just aware that it's something that could happen, that it's something that you could experience, it can be so frightening. And it can then sustain itself longer and turn into a PMAD because the fear takes over, the cortisol rises in a way that was normal to begin with, normal in the normal ranges to begin with, because baby blues is a fluctuation of hormones. You've lost so much. It's your body has just now there's a baby that's exited. The change is just so great in that first period of time directly after labor. Um, so just knowing that you can experience some very scary feelings and very uncomfortable shifts, and some of it's really exciting and beautiful too. Like some of it, that cry is happy cry, but knowing that that's possible, I think, is one of the first things that women should understand, or mothers should understand, because it can set the stage for the rest of the postpartum. Just knowing that, okay, let me breathe through this, let me sit with this discomfort. It'll probably ease up in about 2 weeks. So just knowing that is really important. When it comes to specifically anxiety related to the perinatal period, um, you can have, so there's antenatal anxiety and depression, right? Antenatal PMADs, and then postpartum PMADs. Antenatal is just during the period of pregnancy, which is a pretty under discussed topic too, but is very common. About 10 to 20% of pregnant women, pregnant people feel experience some sort of PMAD during their pregnancy, and then about 1 in 5 experience some sort of PMAD. That's an average. Experience some sort of PMAD, and that's only what's reported once they're postpartum. So anxiety can look similar to most of these disorders or challenges can look very similar to when they're not in the postpartum or perinatal period. But when it comes to the perinatal period, a lot of the anxiety is focused around the baby. And that's just simply the nature of what a mother starts to worry about when there's a new baby in the picture. So with anxiety, it could look like intrusive thoughts. And if you're not familiar with what that feels like, it could be very unsettling. Why am I having these thoughts about harm coming to my baby? That's one of the most common experiences is harm, worried about harm coming to your baby. Even now, I'm no longer technically postpartum according to what the literature out there. I'm not postpartum with my first anymore. But sometimes when I see him walk by a heavy mirror that's hanging on my wall, I have flashes, intrusive thoughts of, oh my God, what if that falls and hits him and really harms him? And it's something that I've brought up to my husband before, and he's like, that never crosses my mind. That lends itself to what I was talking about earlier with the brain changes, right? Something's changed in my brain to be more on alert. So when it comes to perinatal anxiety, you'll notice clenched jaws in the mother, probably disturbed sleep, which again, there's a level of disturbed sleep that is absolutely expected and normal. But you have to start doulas can ask this question. I think it's a great place for doulas to ask, what is disturbing your sleep? Is it the baby waking up? Is it breastfeeding? Is it the things that are not related to emotions? Because if that's the case, perhaps maybe a sleep consultant is helpful, or finding a way to have your partner help with feedings in the middle of the night. Um, but if it's related to intrusive thinking and brain, like a lot of times I hear moms talk about, I just can't shut my brain off. I can't shut it off. It's running away with me, especially when I try to close my eyes at night. Now that is a different type of sleep disturbance, and that can be related to anxiety. Um, so I think looking out for those kinds of less common showing up signs of like panic attacks are a pretty common sign. People could see when that happens. You can see when somebody's in a panic. If somebody's having sleep disturbances in the first 3 months of a child's life, most people don't blink an eye at it. But let's ask, why are you having those sleep disturbances? And that can uncover some interesting things that perhaps were hiding in the background. So anxiety is just so common, but I think that there's a differentiating factor, and this we when we talked earlier through email, we said we would maybe talk about anxiety and OCD, and then two others, anxiety disorders and OCD. OCD is an anxiety disorder, but not all anxiety is presented as OCD. And OCD is an interesting perinatal mood and anxiety disorder because a lot of times with OCD, and that stands for obsessive compulsive disorder, the obsession is about harm coming to the baby. And the compulsion is to maybe either stay away from the baby or do things to make sure you're protecting the baby. And that obsessive thought, that intrusive, recurring, cyclical thought of harm coming to the baby, if you present that to your OB or your midwife, who a lot of maybe a provider who's not as well versed on what perinatal OCD can look like. I've had this happen with a client. They can become alarmed that you might be harmful to your baby or there's a threat to the baby because of the thoughts that the mom is having. You have to ask very specific questions then. And this is where understanding the perinatal period comes into play. Are the thoughts that mom is having disturbing her? Because if they are, that's called ego dystonic, meaning it is not in line with her reality. The thoughts she's having are scaring her a lot. She's not harmful to her baby. she is trying to navigate these disturbing thoughts and also keep her baby safe. When the thoughts are it's called ego syntonic. When a person is starting to have thoughts and their reality is somehow blending into being aligned with those thoughts. Now that is a concern for potential perinatal psychosis. And we're not going to talk about that today. That's a very different and much less common experience. But why I bring it up is because a lot of times perinatal OCD is either unseen and just seen as perinatal anxiety, or it goes down a really dark place where people think there's some harm that could be truly coming to the baby. And it becomes dangerous, unfortunately, because sometimes there's separation of mom and baby, and it's a very sad experience. But had provider been maybe trauma informed and just asked questions differently or understood the perinatal period, that would definitely not happen. So I'll pause there and let you see if there's any follow up to that. Or we could go into more detail about any one of those pieces.
Yeah, no, that was really, really helpful. Actually, I don't think that I've ever had anyone explain the correlation and the difference of those two so well. So I really, really appreciate that. And it just reinforces to me the incredible medicine that is listening, but not just listening, but having those right questions to ask, which is giving us medicine on a whole level in and of itself when we just know the right questions to ask. And it's not the right thing to say, it's the questions to ask because we need to be listening and learning more. And oftentimes I find in my own experience in postpartum, it was hard to describe what I was feeling or what I was thinking or what I even needed. It was just difficult to have the discernment within myself, and so I'm curious about when you work with people, um, how are you able to help? And I guess maybe it is asking the right questions, but for people who might be experiencing that, of having a hard time expressing themselves,
Mhm.
um, what are some ways that we can help women do that or help people in general do that? How are you sharing your gifts and passion for caregiving with others? In a world where education and awareness around the postpartum window is lacking or missing from our modern systems, we have a profound opportunity to shift that paradigm. You may be a few simple offerings away from making a truly impactful difference in the lives of mothers and families in your community. We are here to support your journey in the ways that work best for you. Schedule a conscious care strategy session to meet one on one with me, and let's identify the right next step for you to begin a path of conscious care for new families that fits your life and your needs. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session to schedule a time that works best for you. That's www.sacredwindowstudies.com/strategy-session.
I like that question because when we could put a name to something, it's a lot less scary. We can define it, we can talk about it. We say this phrase in the therapy world, if you name it, you tame it. So if you can name it, you can tame and calm it down a little bit. So it could be really frustrating for somebody who can't find the words or their mind is really jumbled at that point, which is also extremely common to have like a fuzzy brain. People call it mom brain, right? It's extremely common because you're very depleted at that time, not only from the nutrients that have left your body, but from sleep, and the emotional overload that you're experiencing, whether positive or uncomfortable feelings, is a lot. So that also depletes you. With that being said, I would say that the listening and asking and re-asking, asking people, am I understanding that correctly? And repeating what you believe they said and letting them correct you. Because the further they correct you, the more fine-tuned the definition will become, and then they'll find the words for it. But it's really giving them the space to do that, and understanding the less common symptoms that people, maybe they're not less common, but less we're less aware of those symptoms being part of anxiety disorders or depressive disorders. For example, the one of the things that so many people experience postpartum is the sensation, or the experience of stimulation overload. That could come from touching, could come from sound. Um, Usually, those are the two most common. Sometimes smell, but being like physically touched out. I think people use that term, being touched out. A lot of moms feel that. Um, Especially with their second and third child, that's more common. But with the noise stimulation, and also people stimulation, like people want to be there, they want to meet the baby, they want to help, and that's a beautiful thing. But if you feel overstimulated by that, hyperstimulated by that, and that's creating this, like, I call it like a buzzing feeling inside of you, that's that's often related to anxiety. And it doesn't have to be disordered anxiety where it's like at a very like not you don't like using the word normal, but like out of the range of normal level. It could be a in the normal range, but to quell that, you have to be able to identify it for yourself. And sometimes a provider, whether a doula, whether you're a midwife, or whether you're a mental health counselor, can help you recognize, oh, right, when I feel that buzzing in my brain or my body, it's usually because there's too many people around my baby, or too many people around me asking me too many questions, or the TV's on and the baby's crying. That makes me feel really uncomfortable. Okay, so how do we fix that? Now we have some language around it. Now we have some strategy that we can put together, some scheduling with family visits, right? But it's about talking it out, honestly, and processing. Okay, well, when you feel this in your body, one, what does it feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? Because that, from a spiritual perspective and from a energetic perspective, is very important. Um, and what's happening around you when you're feeling that. And then we have sometimes too, when it comes to OCD and the anxiety, what are the thoughts, and depression too, what are the thoughts that are going through your mind at the time you're feeling this thing in your body? So, all really important questions, but it takes time to identify those things. And sometimes somebody doesn't know the answer. And so I'll say, okay, well, why don't you? That's your homework then for this week. When you feel that thing, even if you don't know how to describe it, when you feel that thing in your body, whether it's buzzing or a numbness or just like a feeling like you're not there, like almost like a fog, whatever words we have put to it, when you feel that, try to jot down or make a mental note of what's in your surroundings, whether it's noise or people, and try to make a mental note of mentally what are you thinking about during that time? Where did your mind go? So that you could bring it back to me the next time we talk, and we'll have some really valuable stuff to talk about.
Mm. It's so interesting because so much of those experiences of, hypersensitivity to just sensory input, it can very quickly become too much. We know from looking at it through Ayurveda that like we're air and space are like dramatically elevated. So like our subtle channels where sensory input is coming in are like wide open. The heart is wide open. So things that, we could be resilient through and have, no problem with, crowds or loud places or being touched a lot before, all of a sudden it very quickly can become too much. And, whereas, we always teach our care providers, but also families we work with, that like your body will tell you, like your mind and your heart will tell you when it's too much, and that's your cue to, okay, now I need to like replace that with some quiet, some reduced stimulation, take care of all that. But then there's also what crosses my mind as I'm listening to you is, that point where how much of this is me experiencing the natural, like subtle openness that I have at this time versus this is too much, or this is not
Yeah.
balanced, or this is, I shouldn't be feeling it to this level. And
I should seek extra support for this.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of women only unfortunately see that after the fact. They're like, oh, that was not, I was not in a good place. But they're such in a tunnel. There, it's like a cave postpartum. It's like that immediate postpartum period is like you're in this cave, and some of it's beautiful because you're just surrounded by this like so much love and light with this new life in your life, and some of it's very dark and isolating. Um, so yeah, a lot of people have a hard time identifying that until much later, and that's why our loved ones and our partners and our doulas are so important to identifying those things for us and being able to speak about it. When I say trauma informed, I don't mean that everybody that I speak to has gone through a trauma. I just mean that I'm talking about something in a way that's more gentle and welcoming and inviting, versus hey, you seem really irritable, more like if I have a friend who's postpartum, you seem more irritable lately. Like, is everything okay? That's a very closed question. I'm identifying something that they may feel but don't want to say out loud right away. So being able to ask questions in an open way is probably one of the easiest and most helpful ways to change your language that could help a postpartum person identify with, oh, you're right, like I am struggling more than I care to admit. um and if you can do that in the moment, then they can get the help in the moment, and that's beautiful. um and then having the places to know where to send them, right? There are things that I'm not equipped for with mental health therapy, and I have to send them out to different places, whether it is to a pelvic floor therapist or to sometimes get a psychiatric evaluation, right? Sometimes we're at a severe level where that's necessary to help calm the nervous system with chemical support. um, it's not my go-to, but sometimes it's necessary to get the mom in a place where she can think a little bit more clearly, think with a little less noise in her head, and then we can do the work. So, yeah, I don't know if that necessarily answers the question,
No,
but
yeah.
it is a hard differentiating factor. Like, where is the normal? Is what I ask people when they come to me and they ask me, "Is this normal? Was what I'm experiencing normal?" A lot of times I say, well, it's really common, but it doesn't have to be normal. Like with pain, for example, during pregnancy, it's extremely common to be in pain, but it's not normal. Like that means you should look at it, right? So if you feel some pain, whether physical or emotional, your body's saying, hey, look over here, pay attention to me. So you should pay attention to it, and just be curious about it. Then you can maybe ask, okay, so when you're curious about these symptoms that are going on in your body or your mind, do you notice that they are impacting like your daily activities? Is it taking away from a lot of joy in your life? Can you do the tasks that you feel like you normally should be able to do, like laundry, or are you afraid to go for a walk? Do you feel fearful to take your baby out for a walk? Did you feel fearful of walks prior to this? No? Okay, well that's a shift, right? So let's understand where that shift is coming from. So it's a lot of times asking, well, what is the impact of these physical or emotional experiences on your daily living? Is it not impacting them? Then it's probably in the range of healthy enough. If it's impacting them in a way that is taking away from your joy, stealing some of your light, then I think it's something to be addressed. And the sooner the better, because with intervention during a PMAD, you have such good chances. And I said this to you earlier, PMADs are the most common complication of pregnancy. That's the most treatable. So we should treat it and we should look for it. Um, but if you could get into therapy before it's a problem, or before it's really taking away from some of your joy, even better, because preventative medicine is always better, right? Just eating healthier, and that's something else. We could go into that another day, but nutrition postpartum is so helpful in mental health too. But that's a whole other topic.
We have a lot of episodes on that too. So listeners,
Yeah,
go
I'm
scroll back.
sure.
You'll see a few. But I just think that is so beautiful to hear, Maria, because it really helps people to remember that we are our own best wise teacher and we know the most about our own body. So if something feels off, don't explain it away. Don't look, assume that, you're fine. Just look at it. There can always be something done to help bring something back into balance if we don't ignore it. It's like our body and our mind, it's like our whole being is pointing us in the directions we have to go through how we feel. So it's just such a beautiful reminder that we have the ability and the right to feel good at any given moment in our lives.
Absolutely.
So we
Absolutely.
and there are times in our lives when we deserve to be supported, where we need to be supported, where we're naturally designed to be supported. And this is one of
Yes.
those times. So having,
Yes.
our communities around us, our safety networks, our doulas, our loved ones, this is a huge part of making sure that we're giving the support that's needed in order for us to rebalance the things that naturally might go out of balance during this time. So thank you so much for that. I want to go a little bit into looking at depression specifically now,
Yeah.
and then we can talk a little bit how that can lead into rage. But yeah, so how does this differ from anxiety? I know that it can go in conjunction with that, but
Yes.
what might we traditionally see?
Yes. I'd say that, yeah, they're cousins, right? So anxiety and depression are good cousins, and they do often show up together, whether it's the perinatal period or not. Um, with depression, you'll often see a lack of energy versus with anxiety, you see an overabundance of energetic. Whether it looks like positive energy or not is a different question, but it's more energetic than something like depression. Like a panic attack requires an insane amount of energy. You're not usually panic attacking when you're depressed because your body just doesn't have it. It just doesn't have it in it. Um, More specifically with postpartum depression, so I described how 1 in 5 postpartum women experience some sort of PMAD. With depression specifically, it's 1 in 7 is the rate that's out there. These are all averages, still pretty common. Also can be experienced by the partner. So there's paternal postpartum depression too. So that's another topic that I think is really valuable to talk about. But another time we can go into that. Um, so it can begin at any point, also sometimes during pregnancy, and a lot of times with experiencing loss in a previous pregnancy or having had difficulty conceiving, you'll have more of a chance of something like antenatal depression because you're just so worried and so drained from the experience of getting pregnant that your expectation of, a lot of times this is what you hear with what I hear in the clinical sense, that expectation of the joy of pregnancy just doesn't meet the reality of what they had experienced to get there, which makes people feel upset. That expectation gap is difficult with anything in life, but especially when it comes to the perinatal period. Um, you'll see a lot of deep sadness or feelings of emptiness when it comes to depression versus that might not show up when it's just anxiety or OCD. You'll see a lack of energy where a lot of times the person is sleeping, like oversleeping, which is unusual for postpartum because you're usually getting less sleep, at least early on. Um, this feeling of guilt or worthlessness is a pretty common experience for depression. Depression often misaligns us in a way that sets off a feeling of lack of self confidence. So a lot of times self worth comes up with depression. So that's something to look out for. People don't necessarily, put together sometimes, like my ability as a mother, or um, I'm not going to be seen as doing well in this role, or that like my identity is so shifted now. Where is my self worth? Those A lot of existential questions come up with depression. Um, Now, I'd say that rage is often seen with depression because eventually it does burst up with this energetic, like, oh my God, I can't deal with this anymore. Right. Now, rage can show up it can show up by itself without depression. It could show up with anxiety as well. But I have seen it more commonly. This is just my experience. This is not research based. It's just my experience. I've seen rage show up more commonly with postpartum depression. And I think there's this like anger towards depression. Like, I'm not connecting with my baby enough. I don't know how to connect with my baby because I can't even connect to my own body right now. I feel so empty. That emptiness is a huge one. So rage is an interesting one, and I think it shows up a lot too with that hypersensitivity to stimuli. That's when I see it a lot. the baby's crying, I cannot get it to stop crying. And you see the mother outburst. It's like an outburst of, oh my God, I don't know what to do. And the body just takes over and they start either yelling at the baby or throwing objects. Those are two common ones, yelling at their partner. A lot of like elevated yelling and sound. Um, and then often it's quick, and then when you come down, there is such a feeling of shame, which then adds to the depression. So it is a horrible cycle. And I most often see that rage, and you don't know that the person is being overstimulated unless you ask the questions. But it could be an overstimulation of like even just too many plans are being made and I can't mentally take that right now. So I lash out, right? And so again, finding what triggers those bursts and then finding some strategies around it to calm that stimulus. So often with sound stimuli, if it's the baby crying, I even had to do this. This wasn't for me personally with rage, but with feeling the urge to like go help. If my husband was doing something with like sleeping with the baby, I'd have to use something to muffle the sound because it 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 evokes a physical response in me. It wasn't rage, but for some women, it's rage. And so if you have to muffle the sound, that's okay. You'll still hear the baby crying. You're not going to ignore your baby, and because you get a lot of those feelings of guilt. Oh, well, I'm a bad mom if I put, ear pods on. And it's like, no, you're not a bad mom. You're doing what you need to do so your emotional reactions can stay more balanced, right? But talking that out and processing that through is what gets people to try these strategies and see if they work for them.
Yeah, it's so hopeful to be able to know that there are any number of things that we can do. And as you're talking, like I'm getting all these flashbacks of like, it's just hard. And like I know about postpartum care. I studied postpartum care and I gave it to a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And it's still hard when you're going through it yourself. And so all of these experiences that you've described, yeah, at one stage or another, like I can really relate to them. And I think there's a difference between, you know, going through hard things and suffering through hard things. Like there's a
Yes.
way for us to go through them and still be able to hold ourselves and know that, okay, I've got this, I can do this, I know this, versus I
I'm
can't
drowning.
can't do this. There's
Yeah.
like,
And that's the difference, right? That's the different what you were asking before. There's a difference between I feel uncomfortable and I could tolerate this discomfort to my window of tolerance has been met and out now I am being crushed. There's a huge difference. But community for mothers is natural. We've gotten away from it. Unfortunately, that's just how society has developed in our country, in the United States, and a lot of other countries too. Um, but finding ways to create community is so important, not only for our mothers, but for our providers. And that's kind of what we're like. You're in the world of doulas. I'm in the world of mental health. We need each other, and that's what the PRC, the Perinatal Resource Collaborative, that's its goal, to enhance outcomes for mothers by collaborating with professionals and supporting professionals together. So it's all about community. When women get together, it can really accomplish anything. I know that sounds cliche, but it's the truth. And so we just have to be open enough to talk about these things, be open enough to know what we don't know, and then know the people who do know it so that we could send off that person to get the help they need.
exactly. I love building community. It's my favorite thing to do in work, and I feel so blessed in my life to have community, but I think it's imperative as a professional to have knowledge of who is offering other types of support that we don't offer, as a way, number one, for us to feel equipped to help people find the support that they need when it goes beyond our scope or training. Um, but also just because it feels so much more plugged in. It feels so like we're able to build better, stronger, more resilient practices. But ultimately, I feel tremendously grateful for the growth that I have seen over the course of my career so far in awareness about postpartum care, that it actually exists, number one, and number two, that there's so much enthusiasm and excitement about it. And so, literally, like worldwide, there's just an incredible network of resources and education and support. And, while nothing can really match like a great local support system, especially for those of us who are working virtually with people, we've got so much at our fingertips. And it feels really like a blessing to see the Perinatal Resource Collaborative grow. And so I do want to ask you about how you stepped in to help grow that organization and what it's doing for families and also for professionals, how folks listening to this episode can get involved.
Absolutely. Uh, I'd say that a lot of the really amazing things that happen in life is because you follow once you're more aligned, you could really follow that gut instinct. And I saw Nicole, who is the president, Nicole Harlow, who is the president of the PRC. I saw her post something about like a Mama Savers card where you can, if you wanted to offer your services for a lower cost for moms, like here, put your name on here. Here's the, and it was about creating connection and community. And so I did that. And then I saw her post again about something and I said, let's just meet. I'd like to learn more about, because she was doing some energy work around the womb and so important with the work that I do. So I said, let me just understand what she does. And it was a really like naturally organic development of our relationship. I started with becoming the like the vice president of the board, and just really dove into the work, because while it's not clinical in any sense, it's so different than what I do with my reimagined mind business, um, and with my clinical work. It is so well like it has a lot of synchronicity to it. So I've been able to point my clients in directions that I wasn't able to before. And I feel really empowered being able to do that and say with confidence, I've spoken to this professional. I believe in the work that they do. And I think it could be something that could help you more than what the work that we're doing, or in addition to the work that we're doing. Um, so I got involved with Nicole very, like I said, organically, just off of a mom Facebook group. And that it kind of lends itself to the idea of like finding your community even in the world that we live in today. You have to be a little more open, and just like act like it's not like you're meeting people necessarily at a coffee shop and it's in person, but if you reach out, people are very likely to be open to speaking. um and then, yeah, and then the PRC really just took off with professionals. That is our goal, is to be the village for the villagers. And with supporting the professionals, it's given me a lot of joy because I know it's supporting moms indirectly and directly. And we do have a part of the PRC that's the Supported Moms Club, where all of the resources that the professionals contribute to are put out there for free for moms, because there's so much knowledge and wisdom in this group of professionals that's just ever growing, that we feel it would be a sin not to share it with the world. So we feel with the Supported Moms Club being able to show moms here for free, just check out what we have here. We had, created a cookbook, or there's some birth plans that have been developed by doulas or by birth educators, and many other things that are very supportive for the perinatal period, even in terms of like fertility. So that's another area that I think is so under um, supported. We send women off to what an IVF clinic usually is pretty much like the one stop that she gets sent to after she has trouble getting pregnant after a while. But there's a lot of nutrition or energetic work, um, emotional burdens that we're holding in our womb space, that if we find a way to shift, could support welcoming a pregnancy into our body. Um, so it's just there's so many professionals that I've met through this that I feel incredibly blessed, you being one of them. And I'm so glad to be on this podcast, but it's all about alignment and connection and finding those people that you align with and connecting them with yourself, but then with the world and other people that need them.
Yeah, it's really exciting to see all these changes happening, and I'm really grateful to have met you as well through the PRC. Maria, I just want to thank you for coming on this podcast and talking about this important work. I am excited to look further into your practice. I know that you have a number of talented practitioners working with you. So it's really beautiful to see this practice exist. And I know that there are others from state to state doing really similar, beautiful work. So for those of you who are listening to this podcast, please continue to look at resources for PMADs. I know you mentioned earlier that you got training through postpartum.net. Is that
It's Postpartum Support International. So I think that
international?
website is psi.net. I think
Okay.
it's psi.net. I'm not positive, but there are some really wonderful resources, and some they offer some free groups for moms, and for dads, I think too now. That they just have some great resources. And when it comes to if you're looking for resources and you're having trouble finding them, I like to be a connector. That's one of the things I enjoy doing. Feel free to reach out to me on my website, reimaginemind.com. I have, a podcast. It's not just, well, right now it's structured around the perinatal period. And that provides some resources too, just like some types of professionals that might be really useful that you didn't even know existed for the perinatal period. But I'm happy to point people in whatever direction they need. If I don't have it, I will help you find it. So yeah, so I can send you like a list of the links that for the different communities that we spoke about today, if you want to put it in the show notes for people to be able to access.
Perfect. Perfect. That is exactly what we'll do. Maria, thank you again. I look forward to connecting again in other ways that we'll be collaborating in the future. And for those of you listening, thank you for being part of this community. It means everything. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Shanti, Shanti.
The Center for Sacred Window Studies has been training postpartum care providers, professionals who work with new families, and individuals passionate about postpartum care since 2018. We regularly host live free events alongside our online and in-person training and certification programs. Hop on our newsletter list to get direct access to all of our events and community support gatherings. Our mission is not only in training conscious postpartum care providers, but in fostering a robust, informed, and thriving community of postpartum professionals. Once you step inside, you're family forever. Visit www.sacredwindowstudies.com to add your email to our newsletter list. You can support our work by subscribing to the Sacred Window podcast and sharing with someone you know who would love it. Thanks for being here and participating in the culture-wide shift that recognizes the need for and the importance of conscious postpartum care.